The fluorescent light of Silverline Finance Bureau still hummed in my memory as I walked into my son's new restaurant. I'd poured my late husband's savings, over $25,000, into this venture. But the door was unlocked, the scent of stale espresso hanging in the air. "Caleb," I called out. Marissa, my daughter-in-law, appeared from the back, wiping her hands on a towel. "Oh. Hey. What are you doing here?" I forced a smile. I wanted to ask about the opening date. When should I plan to come help? She paused, looking at me with those cold, pale eyes. Then she delivered the line that cracked my world in two. "It was a week ago. Mom, didn't Caleb tell you? My name is Helena Ward, and for the past 35 years, my life has been ruled by ledgers, spreadsheets, and the quiet, dependable rhythm of an accountant at Silverline Finance Bureau. I'm 58 now, a widow for a decade, and I thought I knew exactly how my remaining years would unfold: quiet stability, maybe a few more cruises, and the immense pride of seeing my son, Caleb, finally launch his dream restaurant. I'd walked into the place full of that maternal hope, only to have the light extinguished by the woman standing across from me. "It was a week ago. Mom, didn't Caleb tell you?" Marissa's voice was flat, devoid of the forced cheerfulness she usually reserved for me. A sickening chill snaked through my chest. I stared at her, trying to process the words. A week. The restaurant had been operational for 7 days, hosting customers, taking money, achieving the milestone I'd sacrificed my late husband's savings for over $25,000, and I, the primary investor and his mother, was the last to know. A week I finally managed, my voice a dry whisper. "Marissa, you know I've been asking for the date for months. I was going to help with the books, remember?" She shrugged, a gesture of profound indifference that cut me deeper than any angry word. "Oh, I guess we were just busy. You know, Caleb handled the grand opening paperwork. It was a soft launch. Soft launch." My mind screamed the absurdity of the term. A soft launch, where you intentionally excluded the person whose money paid for the new stainless steel range and the point-of-sale system. I looked past her, searching for my son. Caleb Ward, my boy. The reason I'd taken extra shifts after his father died. The boy whose education I'd funded and whose early failures I'd quietly absorbed. He emerged from the kitchen, looking harried. He wore the crisp white chef's jacket he'd always dreamed of, but his eyes were guarded. "Caleb," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Your restaurant has been open for a week, and I had no idea." He wouldn't meet my gaze. He busied himself wiping down a counter that was already spotless. "Mom, I'm so sorry. Things just moved really fast. I meant to call you. I really did. It's been crazy here." Crazy. The word felt like sandpaper in my throat. "I helped you secure the loan. Honey, I need to see the initial ledger. We need to talk about the quarterly projections. That's why I came." Caleb mumbled something about being short-staffed and needing to check an order. He physically avoided contact, his body language speaking volumes of evasion and guilt. It wasn't the tired slump of a new business owner. It was the tense stiffness of a man trying to hide something large and sharp. I decided not to push. Not yet. The accountant in me knew better than to escalate without data. I took a seat near the window, pretending to admire the tasteful, modern decor paid for largely by my money, while observing them through the reflection of the street outside. That's when I saw it. Through the glass door of the restaurant, I noticed a man I'd never seen before, wearing a generic delivery service jacket, approaching Marissa near the hostess stand. He wasn't delivering food. He discreetly slipped her a thick, white envelope, the kind that held cash or sensitive documents, and was gone in a flash. Marissa immediately tucked it into the pocket of her jeans, exchanging a quick, nervous glance with Caleb, who was still trying to ignore me near the kitchen pass. Danger. That's what pulsed through me. It wasn't just my son being thoughtless. This felt calculated. The exclusion, the avoidance, the secret exchange of envelopes. This wasn't a misunderstanding about a grand opening date. This was a cover-up. The seasoned mother's intuition, the one that had steered me through the choppy waters of widowhood and single parenthood, flared into a warning. I stood up, forcing a weak smile. Well, I should let you two get back to it. Just text me the first week's sales reports when you can... Okay. Caleb seemed relieved, managing a quick, "Sure, Mum," before disappearing back into the kitchen. Marissa walked me to the door, her hand resting lightly on the small envelope in her pocket. I drove slowly around the block, parked in a side street, and walked back behind the building, through the narrow, smelly alleyway where the trash bins were kept. It was a cold, dreary afternoon, and the air was thick with the scent of old grease and decay. My heart hammered against my ribs, driven by a fear I hadn't felt since the night the police cruiser had pulled up to tell me about my husband. I lifted the lid of the large dumpster reserved for Caleb's restaurant, rummaging through the plastic bags. Then I froze. Lying on top of a heap of discarded vegetable peelings was a crumpled piece of paper, half-stained with coffee. I pulled it out, smoothed the wrinkles, and saw the unmistakable logo of the bank that held my personal checking account. It was a receipt, dated yesterday, showing a large sum paid to a vendor I'd never heard of. But the detail that turned my blood to ice wasn't the amount, it was the account number. My account number. This wasn't a casual oversight. This wasn't a mistake due to a crazy week. They hadn't told me about the opening because they didn't want me here. This was a clear sign of deliberate, financial betrayal. The paper was proof. The game had changed. I sat in my Ford, the stained receipt still clutched in my hand, watching the muted light of Caleb's restaurant through the rearview mirror. The cold anger from the alley had morphed into a bone-deep tremor of sorrow and self-recrimination. I thought back to the funeral, 10 years ago. My husband, gone in a freak accident. Caleb was barely 22, a mess of grief and aimlessness. I'd focused all my widowed energy on him, on his success. I remembered the feeling of being his bedrock, the person who made sure the bills were paid and the dreams were kept alive. I had shielded him from every harsh reality. Had I done him a disservice? Had I been so busy building a safe world for him that I failed to teach him how to fight for himself? Was he simply too weak, too easily manipulated by the brittle, ambitious woman he'd married, to stand up to this? My mind began to race, cataloguing every small anomaly I'd ignored in the past few months. The first was the mail. For the past 3 months, my mailbox had been littered with bank statements and transfer notices that made no sense. They weren't from my regular accounts. I'd chalked it up to junk mail or simple clerical errors. Now, the image of those unfamiliar envelopes postmarked from 3 different states flashed in my memory. An alarming chain of breadcrumbs. Then came the bigger, more sickening revelation. The retirement fund. I had a separate, small IRA from my late husband's firm. It was barely touched, earmarked for true emergencies. Just last month, I'd received a notification of a $20,000 withdrawal. The note attached cited an urgent, authorized transfer. Authorized. I hadn't authorized a thing. The paper trail had included a digitized signature. I pulled up the document on my phone right there in the car, comparing it to my signature on my driver's license. The angle of the H in Helena was slightly off. The flourish on the W in Ward too neat. It was a good forgery, but an obvious one to the person who had been signing that name for nearly 6 decades. They were systematically draining me, and it was all happening under the guise of an authorization I never gave. This all pointed back to Marissa. I recalled her behavior since the wedding, 4 years ago. She had been politely frosty, always finding a reason for Caleb to skip our Sunday dinners. He's working late. Mom. Or we have an early flight to see her aunt. They were excuses, designed to chip away at the bond I shared with my son. Marissa didn't want a mother-in-law. She wanted exclusive control. I drove home slowly. As I pulled into my driveway, Mrs. Rodriguez, my neighbor from across the street, was watering her prize-winning hydrangeas. She waved me over with an innocent smile. "Helena? Dear, I'm so glad you're home," she chirped. "I meant to ask you about your daughter-in-law. I saw her again yesterday. She was driving that big black SUV, dropping off the kids at the park, and I saw her talking to that handsome young man again, the one with the beard. He's always waiting for her down the street, way past where I can see their house." I felt a cold prickle on my arms. What man? Teresa, I didn't know Marissa had any male friends around here. Teresa shrugged, oblivious to the bomb she'd dropped. "Oh, I don't know his name. He just looks important." She meets him late afternoon, maybe 3 or 4 o'clock, out of sight. They always look very serious. The envelope exchange, the unknown vendor on the receipt, the forged signature, and now, a clandestine meeting with a strange man. This wasn't just about the restaurant. This was a syndicate, a planned, deliberate operation to isolate, defraud, and strip me of my financial stability. I realized with a dreadful certainty this wasn't just a son making mistakes. This was financial elder abuse, orchestrated by his wife. I knew who I had to call. I needed someone who understood the law. But more importantly, someone who knew me. I drove straight to the downtown office tower where Olivia Mercer had her law practice. Olivia had been my husband's lawyer and my best friend for over 20 years, though we'd drifted apart since his death. When I walked into her meticulously organized 30th floor office, she looked up, her expression shifting instantly from professional gravity to deep, concerned friendship. "Helena, dear, I'm so glad you're here," she said, rising to hug me tight. "It's been too long." "What is it? You look like you haven't slept in 3 days." I placed the crumpled receipt, the withdrawal notice, and the forgery evidence on her sleek mahogany desk. I recounted everything: the unopened restaurant, Caleb's evasion, Marissa's coldness, the strange man, the $20,000 theft. Olivia, calm and razor-sharp, put on her reading glasses. She studied the documents for a long moment, her brow furrowed. "Helena, this is beyond a family misunderstanding," she said, her voice dropping to a low, serious register. "If this signature is indeed a forgery, and they are systematically draining your retirement and investment funds without your consent or knowledge, this is a textbook case of financial exploitation and abuse of the elderly. It's a criminal matter, not just a civil one." She looked me dead in the eye, the gravity of her words settling over me like a shroud. "We need to move fast," We need to freeze assets. But first, we need undeniable proof of the extent of the fraud. This isn't a suspicion anymore. This is war. Olivia moved with the speed and precision of a predator. Within 48 hours, she had secured a temporary cease and desist on any further major transactions from my accounts and initiated a forensic audit. "It's worse than you thought." "Helena," Olivia announced, sliding a thick printout across her desk. The paper was covered in red ink and highlighted sections. The $20,000 withdrawal was just the tip of the iceberg. I found a cluster of wire transfers totaling nearly $45,000 over the past 3 months, all authorized by your supposed power of attorney documentation. The bank is cooperating now, confirming the digital signatures were fraudulent. My breath hitched. $65,000 gone. And the purpose of the transfers is telling. Olivia continued, tapping the page with a pen. "Look at this 8 separate transfers to 3 different, known offshore online gambling sites. Marissa, it seems, has a serious problem. And she's been using your money to feed it. But that wasn't the most damning piece of evidence. Underneath the gambling site transfers was a recurring series of large deposits funneled into a private account. The recipient's name was highlighted in aggressive yellow Griffin Hale. "Who is Griffin Hale?" I asked, my voice barely a tremor. Olivia leaned back, her expression grim. I ran him through a quick background check. He has minor priors, nothing violent, mostly loan shark related and credit fraud. He's also the likely beneficiary of Marissa's desperate gambling debt. But I have a gut feeling." She paused, her eyes locking onto mine. "That he's more than just a debt collector. The amounts, the frequency, the discreetness. I suspect he and Marissa have a relationship outside of business. The idea of my daughter-in-law running off with a con artist while stripping my son's future was a new level of agony. That evening, I decided to do a deep, final cleaning of the filing cabinet my husband had left me. I found an envelope marked "Mortgage Documents." What I pulled out made the blood rush from my head. It wasn't my current mortgage paperwork. It was a brand new loan application, a second mortgage on my house signed and submitted. The date on the application was barely 2 weeks ago. My signature was an amateur imitation this time, shaky and rushed. But the real shock was the applicant, Caleb Ward. My son had physically submitted the documents, listing the home he grew up in as collateral, without a single word to me. The next day, I approached my branch bank manager, a quiet woman I'd known professionally for 7 years. I didn't mention Caleb or Marissa. I simply asked about the recent high-volume transactions and the attempted second mortgage. She pulled me into a private office, her face pale with conflict. "Helena, I shouldn't be telling you this, but they came in a few times. Your son and his wife. They said you were becoming forgetful." She hesitated, then whispered the damning words. "They said you had been diagnosed with memory loss and that they needed control of your assets to keep you safe." The sheer, calculated cruelty of it stole my breath. Forgetful. They weren't just stealing my money. They were attempting to legally erase my competence, to make me a ward of their financial schemes. They were trying to lock me out of my own life by suggesting I had Alzheimer's or severe dementia. It was the perfect, terrifying framework for financial elder abuse. They were not just committing fraud. They were building a legal foundation for total control. "We are done talking. We are moving to action," Olivia stated when I relayed the sickening conversation. We need three things. 1. A hidden recording device to capture their admissions. 2. Legal wiretapping and surveillance warrants based on the bank's confirmation of fraud. And 3. We need eyes on them 24/7. Olivia called a former associate, a grizzled, no-nonsense private investigator named Ronan Briggs. He was a man who looked like he spent his days in forgotten diners and abandoned warehouses. Within the hour, Ronan was sitting across from us, listening intently to the whole sordid affair. Ronan started immediately. By the next afternoon, he sent his first report. Marissa Ward met a man matching Griffin Hale's description, early 30s, dark hair, leather jacket at a desolate industrial warehouse on the city's East End at approximately 3 They exchanged a large, heavy duffel bag. It appeared to contain a substantial amount of cash. Surveillance confirmed they hugged before parting ways. My stomach twisted. That was my money in that bag. The money I had earned. The money my husband had left. And Caleb, my son, was nowhere in the picture. The feeling of betrayal was now replaced by a chilling clarity. I wasn't fighting my son and his wife. I was fighting a criminal conspiracy. Ronan Briggs didn't waste time. Within 24 hours of his first sighting, he had successfully installed a tiny, high-definition camera in a discreet recess near the service entrance of the desolate East End warehouse. We didn't have to wait long for the payoff. The footage arrived via encrypted link late Tuesday night. Olivia and I sat side by side, watching the grim tableau unfold on the screen in her office. First, Caleb's familiar silhouette appeared. He looked nervous, clutching a thick manila envelope to his chest. He handed it to Marissa. I watched my son, my naive, ambitious Caleb, say something to his wife, his expression earnest. From the way his lips moved, I could guess the dialogue, perhaps. Here's the money for the new ovens. Or this should cover the inventory. He truly believed he was funding his future. Then came the knife twist. Marissa took the envelope from Caleb, her face registering a flicker of cold satisfaction. She gave him a perfunctory peck on the cheek, a gesture that looked entirely like a dismissal, and Caleb quickly retreated, looking relieved to be out of the strange location. Barely 3 minutes later, Griffin Hale emerged from the shadows. Marissa walked straight toward him, bypassing the car she arrived in. Without a word, she handed the manila envelope Caleb had just delivered directly to Griffin. The audio was muffled, but the conversation was chillingly clear. "Did you get the full amount this time?" Griffin asked, his voice low and guttural. Marissa sighed, a sound of weary greed. "Yes. He says it's for the down payment on the walk-in freezer. He keeps believing all the vendor invoices I'm showing him. The old woman is next. I got the final power of attorney documents ready for her to sign this week. Once we get the title to her house, we're done." And Caleb Marissa laughed, a short, nasty sound that made me involuntarily recoil in the leather chair. Caleb. He's the useful idiot. He signs what I tell him to sign because he thinks he's saving his restaurant. His job was to make the transfers look legitimate and get his mother to sign over the control. He doesn't even know he's not coming with us. Griffin smiled, a predatory gleam in his eyes. Good. Book the flight for the day after the closing. Belize. The money needs to be laundered through the offshore accounts before we touch it. The screen went dark. The silence in Olivia's office was suffocating. I sat there, numb, feeling the absolute collapse of my world. Caleb wasn't just complicit, He was the first victim in a much larger, more devastating con. His role was to create the legitimate paper trail, the power of attorney, the loan application to gain initial access to my funds. Marissa's role was the final execution, stripping every last asset, my home, my savings, and then vanishing with her lover. Griffin. My head began to pound, not with rage, but with a terrible, crystalline clarity. I could have succumbed to tears, screamed at the injustice, or thrown my phone across the room. But as an accountant, I understood systems, and I understood damage control. My pain was profound, but my focus had to be sharper. They think he's stupid enough to give them the keys to my entire life, I whispered, my voice calm despite the devastation churning inside. They forgot that I'm the one who taught him how to read a balance sheet. I looked at Olivia, my resolve hardening. I'm not calling the police yet. They need to think the plan is moving forward. We need to catch them in the act of the final transfer. That video isn't the end. It's the beginning of my counter-move. Olivia gripped my arm firmly. Helena, listen to me. From this moment on, you are the sweetest, most trusting, most forgetful mother they could imagine. Absolute silence. You must not, under any circumstances, let Caleb or Marissa think you suspect a thing. Play the frail, easy-to-trick elderly widow. It was a tough role, but the thought of their smug faces, their calculated betrayal, gave me the fuel I needed. I would play the role of the victim perfectly until the very last curtain call. Ronan's voice crackled over the speakerphone. I have one more thing. Ladies, I ran the restaurant's business filings. That place isn't a restaurant. It's a shell corporation. They filed it under a holding company that is currently under investigation for illegal gambling transactions in 3 neighboring counties. The restaurant isn't Caleb's dream. It's Marissa's front. A sophisticated way to launder her debt money and provide a cover story for all the cash movement. The last sliver of hope that Caleb was merely misguided shattered. The restaurant was a lie. The loan was a lie. And their love was a deadly illusion. My son was standing on quicksand, pulling me down with him. The battle was no longer just about money. It was about saving my name, my home, and confronting the man my son had become. Mom, I need you to come to the restaurant tomorrow morning, Caleb said over the phone, his tone tightly controlled, lacking his usual meandering charm. We just need to finalize some paperwork, lender stuff. It's important. I heard Marissa's sharp whisper in the background, likely coaching him, reminding him to sound firm. It's the final push. I played my role perfectly. Oh, sweetie, is it paperwork? What kind of paperwork did I remember to bring my glasses last time? My memory isn't what it used to be. You know. I let my voice trail off into a hesitant, almost confused murmur. He sighed, a sound of strained patience. It's fine. Mum, just power of attorney revisions. Standard updates. Just be there at 10:30 in the morning? Okay. Honey, I'll try to remember, I said, and hung up. The feigned weakness felt like acid on my tongue, but the knowledge that I was luring them into the trap kept me steady. The next morning, I arrived at the restaurant, carrying a bulky folder provided by Olivia. It contained the fraudulent paperwork, carefully replaced with dummy documents that looked identical, but were legally inert. Caleb seemed stressed, wiping sweat from his brow even though the dining room was cool. Marissa was the picture of sleek, icy professionalism, holding a gold pen ready. She seated me at a small corner table, away from any potential witnesses. "Here, Mum," Caleb said, pushing a stack of papers toward me. "Just sign at the bottom of these 4 pages. They're just minor amendments to the existing authority, smoothing out the transfer process." I took the pen. My hand, trembling, a genuine tremor fueled by adrenaline, but one they instantly interpreted as old age and frailty. I signed the first document slowly, then deliberately signed the next 2, letting my hand slip slightly, making the last 2 signatures barely legible smudges. I was buying time, ensuring they couldn't rush the legal authentication process. Caleb frowned, leaning in. "Mum, that one's a bit messy. Can you initial right here?" His annoyance was palpable. This was the first time his desperate greed had fully eclipsed the mask of the dutiful son. He was impatient, sensing the finish line. Marissa quickly snatched the pen from my hand. "It's fine. Caleb. She's just tired. Give it here. Mum, we just need this last one. It's the full plenary power of attorney. It just makes everything smoother, so you don't have to worry about the business side at all." She pushed the final, most crucial document toward me, her smile tight and predatory. This was the kill stroke, the paper that would transfer my entire financial identity to her control. I looked at her, then at Caleb, who was watching with anxious, hungry eyes. The sight of his complicity was a physical blow, a pain that eclipsed the fear. I suddenly leaned back in the chair, letting my face drain of color. I faked a sharp, rattling cough and grabbed my chest. "Oh dear. I don't feel well. I feel faint." I deliberately let myself slump sideways, knocking my chair a little off balance, a calculated mini-collapse. The movement immediately shattered the tension and the momentum of the signing. Marissa cursed under her breath, her perfect facade cracking for a second. "Mom, don't do that. Just sign the paper. Please." Caleb rushed to my side, momentarily reverting to the worried boy I remembered. "Marissa, stop, Mom. Are you okay? Should I get you some water?" "Just dizzy," I gasped, clutching the collar of my blouse. The paperwork was forgotten. My feigned illness had brought me the necessary delay. As they awkwardly fussed over me, trying to decide whether I was having a medical emergency or just being an inconvenient old woman, my phone buzzed with an urgent text from Ronan. I managed to check it under the pretense of leaning down to steady myself. Ronan. She booked flights, one way, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., Belize City, 2 tickets, hers and Hale's, no third ticket. She's ready to make the final move. This confirmed it. Marissa was done with Caleb. She was taking the loot and running with Griffin, leaving my son to face the legal wreckage alone. The game was in its final, deadly phase. Olivia's next move was swift. She immediately contacted the police department's fraud and elder abuse unit, providing the video evidence, Ronan's flight confirmation, and the bank's fraudulent documents. The arrest warrants were being prepared. I had to maintain the weak facade, which I did until Caleb drove me home, muttering apologies about the stress of the business. Later that night, around 11:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. It was Caleb. He looked completely undone, his chef's shirt rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. "Mum, I need to talk to you," he pleaded, stepping into the entryway. "Marissa is furious. She said you intentionally didn't sign the papers right. She says we're going to lose the lease, lose the restaurant, everything." He was desperate. The realization of his impending failure, not my suffering, was driving him. He looked at me with those eyes, the familiar eyes of my child, mixed with the desperate, haunted look of a man who knows he's drowning. It was a combination that ripped my heart in two. I felt the familiar maternal urge to comfort him, to save him. But I suppressed it, remembering the video, remembering the money, remembering the betrayal. I can't lose the restaurant. Mum, he begged, tears starting in his eyes. I know I messed up not telling you about the opening, but I swear I'm trying to fix it. Can we just go to the bank right now, get the signing done? I need to show Marissa I can handle this. Or I don't know what she'll do. The sheer panic in his voice, his total subordination to Marissa, solidified my resolve. He was a victim, yes, but also a willing accomplice. He needed a reckoning, not a rescue. I stood tall. The frail widow gone. No. Caleb, I said firmly, not tonight. We will go to the bank first thing tomorrow morning. I need to see the loan officer and your attorney to understand exactly what I am signing. I won't do this in the dark anymore. He looked momentarily stunned by my unexpected strength, but then relief washed over him. The signing was still going to happen. The final execution was still on schedule. He had no idea the attorney we would be meeting was Olivia, and the loan officer would be the police. I woke up before dawn, the adrenaline a clean, sharp current in my veins. The old woman who was forgetful was gone, replaced by the calculating accountant who was about to close the biggest and saddest deal of her life. I wore a comfortable, unassuming sweater and carried the heavy legal folder containing Olivia's dummy documents, perfect replicas of the power of attorney forms. Olivia had secured an undetectable tracking device and placed it inside the lining of my jacket, a fail-safe. At 8:45 a.m., Marissa and Caleb arrived in their dark SUV. Marissa was driving, which immediately struck me as odd. Caleb usually drove. She was dressed in expensive athleisure wear, looking ready for a long flight, not a morning at the bank. "Good morning." "Mom," Marissa chirped, her tone too bright, too forced. She looked highly strung, barely concealing her excitement. "Ready to get this done?" "Yes, dear," I replied, allowing my voice to flutter slightly. I hope the bank isn't too busy. I hate crowds. As we pulled out, I saw a familiar, nondescript sedan parked 3 cars down, Ronan Briggs. He was in constant, silent contact with Olivia and the police unit, who were waiting on standby. "We're not going to your bank." "Mom," Caleb suddenly said from the passenger seat, sounding slightly embarrassed. I maintained a serene facade. "Oh, did the lawyer change the meeting spot?" "Yes." Marissa cut in, her eyes flicking nervously between the rearview mirror and the road ahead. "They said the bank meeting rooms were full. We're going to meet at a private notary service they recommend. It's more confidential." The knot in my stomach tightened. Change of plan. This was the classic move of a con artist, disrupt the expected setting to isolate the victim. The bank was a place of witnesses. A private notary was not. I knew then that this was the bait and switch, but I had to follow the thread. Marissa drove out of the city, not toward the downtown financial district, but east, toward the mountains. The road became winding and forested. After nearly 30 minutes, we turned off the main road onto a rough, dirt track marked only by a faded sign for a hunting lodge. "Marissa, where are we going?" Caleb asked, his voice now betraying genuine confusion. "This isn't the notary's office." Marissa's jaw was set, her eyes hard. "Just relax, Caleb. This is where Griffin is meeting us. He needs to witness the signing. 2. It's part of the contract for the financing. Now shut up and do exactly as I say if you don't want to lose everything. The cold finality in her voice hit Caleb like a physical blow. He stared at her, then back at me, his face pale with horror. The dawning realization of his true role, not partner, but tool, was shattering him right before my eyes. We pulled up to a dilapidated, remote wooden cabin. It was dark, surrounded by towering pines, and completely cut off from the world. As we stepped out of the car, I looked at Caleb, and in that moment, the years of pain and anger dissolved into a single, complex recognition. He was both the cause of my distress and the most tragic victim of this woman. He hadn't just enabled the fraud, he had been deceived and dehumanized by the person he thought he loved. The moment we were inside the cabin, Marissa acted. She slammed the door shut, locking it with a heavy, rusty bolt. She spun around, her face a mask of triumphant viciousness. "Give me the documents, Helena." She spat, extending a hand. The sweet, fragile persona was fully gone. I placed the folder on the splintered table. As I did, she lunged, grabbing the entire folder from me, not even waiting for me to sign the dummy documents inside. She was so desperate, so close to her goal, that she didn't bother with the legal niceties. "I have to go," she announced, stuffing the folder into a large backpack. "I'll be back in 2 hours. Don't try to leave. The door is locked. And Griffin will be checking on you." Caleb lunged forward. Go, where you told me we were meeting the lawyers." "Where are you going?" "Marissa." She didn't even look at him. "I told you to shut up." "Caleb, I'm taking these to the notary to finalize the title transfer and the wire instructions. You two can wait here." She looked at me, a cruel smirk twisting her lips. "Don't worry. Mom, once the money is finalized, you'll be taken care of. A very nice facility upstate is already expecting you." Then, she was gone. The heavy bolt slid home, plunging the cabin into a thick, suffocating silence, broken only by Caleb's ragged breathing. They had successfully trapped the forgetful old woman and the useful idiot son in the final stage of their scheme. The cabin reeked of damp wood and loneliness. Outside, the forest was silent, absorbing every sound. The moment the heavy bolt dropped into place, locking us in, a switch flipped inside me. I was no longer the frail, dizzy mother. I walked over to the single, grimy window and looked out. Marissa's SUV was already a distant speck on the dirt road. She was rushing to meet Griffin, convinced she held the keys to my entire financial life, blissfully unaware that the folder contained nothing but cleverly crafted decoys. Caleb stood paralyzed in the middle of the room, his eyes wide, fixed on the door Marissa had just locked. The color had completely drained from his face, leaving behind the ghastly hue of profound shock. She locked us in," he stammered, his voice barely audible. "She said we had to wait here. She said Griffin would check on us." I didn't soften my gaze. I simply looked at him, waiting for the truth to spill out. He finally collapsed onto the dusty floor, burying his face in his hands. The dam broke, and he began to sob, the raw, ugly sound of a man facing utter ruin. "I didn't know. Mom," he choked out between ragged breaths. "Not all of it, I swear. She told me the bank needed the power of attorney to protect the restaurant's assets during the transition. I signed papers. So many papers. She told me it was all about the business, the lease, the equipment, and the $45,000 that went to offshore gambling sites." "Caleb?" I asked, my voice flat and cold. "Did you sign those transfers for the walk-in freezer?" 2. He looked up, tears streaming down his cheeks, his eyes full of wretched self-pity and shame. I knew about the gambling, Mum. I did. She got into trouble, deep trouble, with some bad people. She told me if I didn't help her make the transfers, they would hurt her, hurt the restaurant. I thought I was just covering her debt. I didn't know she was planning to take the house or leave me. Oh, God, Mom. I knew I was being stupid, but I thought she needed me. I thought I was saving her. His confession was pathetic, a torrent of weakness and misguided loyalty. He had known enough to be criminally liable, yet he had been too blind, too desperate to hold on to the illusion of his dream and his marriage, to see he was merely a buffer between Marissa and prison. I looked away from his despair and toward the thin strip of light coming from the top of the door. The rush of pure, undiluted hatred I had felt for the past week was gone. It had been replaced by an aching, profound sense of loss. The man I saw wasn't just a perpetrator. He was the ghost of the boy I had lost somewhere along the path of his adulthood. The tracker. I subtly placed my hand over the breast pocket of my jacket, confirming the tiny, cold presence of the homing device Olivia had sewn in. Ronan was tracking that signal. I just needed to wait. Barely 15 minutes after Marissa left. The silence of the forest was broken by the distant, low thrumming of a helicopter, the noise too professional, too steady to be a recreational flight. Suddenly, Ronan's voice, amplified but muffled, cut through the quiet. "This is the police. We have the cabin surrounded. We have the warrants." The cabin was instantly flooded with harsh, moving light as officers surrounded the perimeter. They knew exactly where we were. Just moments later, Ronan called Olivia. His voice was breathless with urgency. She got to the meeting spot. The one-way ticket confirmed it. She met Griffin at the drop point half a mile down the trail, thinking she had the power of attorney. We moved in immediately. Marissa is in custody. We got the folder. But it's the dummy documents. Great work. Helena. And Griffin Hale. Olivia asked. He bolted into the woods the second he saw the lights. Ronan replied. But I anticipated that. I have him cut off at the creek. He's surrounded. He's not going far. Within minutes. The heavy door of the cabin shuddered, and an officer used a battering ram to break the ancient bolt. The light flooded in, revealing Caleb still huddled on the floor. Mrs. Ward. Caleb Ward. You are safe now. As I walked out of the dark, stuffy cabin and into the blinding relief of the police lights, I felt physically lighter, as if a great, terrible weight had been lifted. Marissa was caught. Griffin was caught. My property was safe. The revenge was complete. But as Caleb was carefully led out, his hands cuffed, his head bowed, the officer read him his rights, and I realized the revenge had come at the highest possible price. He was free from the cabin, but his legal fate, the fact that he had aided and abetted fraud, was now hanging heavy and dark above him. The cost of my salvation was the near destruction of my son. The sterile chill of the police station was a stark contrast to the humid air of the cabin. I sat in a small conference room with Olivia, waiting. The arrests had been made, the evidence secured, but the emotional cost was just beginning to register. Caleb was interrogated first. When he emerged, his face was tear-streaked and drawn, but there was a strange, raw relief in his posture. He had given a full, detailed statement, confessing to every fraudulent signature he'd copied, every deceptive transfer he'd initiated. and every lie he'd told to me, always insisting it was under Marissa's manipulative influence. He accepted the burden of his complicity. Marissa was next. Her interrogation was swift and venomous. She immediately turned on Caleb, claiming he was the initial ringleader. He was completely willing to sign over his mother's money for the restaurant. He thought he was smarter than her. I was just the one doing the paperwork. She shrieked, her voice echoing faintly through the corridor. It was the final, brutal stab in the back, a calculated attempt to save herself by destroying her husband's defense. Griffin Hale, the loan shark and lover, confirmed Marissa was the mastermind behind the elder abuse and the plan to flee to Belize. However, he also provided damning evidence stacks of texts and signed forms showing Caleb's eager participation in the fraudulent activities, proving my son was far from an innocent pawn. Finally, I was taken to see Caleb. The room was small, the air heavy with regret. He was no longer cuffed, but he looked trapped, his eyes begging for something I wasn't sure I could give. "Mom," he whispered, rising slightly from his seat. I am so sorry. I never thought she would hurt you. The second mortgage, the memory loss lie. I told her no, but she said if I didn't help her make the transfers, they would hurt her, hurt the restaurant. I was scared. Mom, I was weak. My anger had begun to cool, replaced by a deep, weary sorrow. I looked at the man who was my son and saw how desperately he needed to believe his own narrative of victimhood. "Caleb," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "you didn't just sign documents. You looked me in the eye and lied about the opening date. You submitted paperwork claiming I had lost my mind. You willingly helped steal my future to save your marriage to a woman who was already planning to abandon you and take the money." I paused, the truth slicing through the air. You didn't lose the ability to defend yourself. You lost the ability to distinguish right from wrong. Long ago. I didn't know if I could forgive him. The pain was too fresh. The betrayal too deep. Olivia entered the room, her face conveying professional urgency mixed with personal sympathy. She pulled me aside. "Helena, we have what we need to convict Marissa and Griffin on all counts: fraud, conspiracy, and elder financial abuse," she said in a low voice. "The evidence is overwhelming. Your assets are safe, and the power of attorney is invalidated." She then looked toward Caleb, who was staring blankly at the wall. "But to guarantee your safety and the conviction, we have to submit all the evidence. That includes the documents and testimony proving Caleb's voluntary, albeit coerced, participation in the initial stages of the fraud, the forgery, the transfers, and the loan application." I felt the blood drain from my face. What does that mean for him? It means he is still liable for felony fraud, even if he was manipulated. Olivia explained gently. He cooperated fully, which will help, but he knowingly participated in a crime against an elder. The prosecution is going to push for a guilty plea to a lesser charge, likely involving a long probation and restitution, but there is still a high risk of jail time. The old, familiar struggle flared within me. Maternal love versus absolute justice. For 3 decades, I had sacrificed everything to protect this boy. Now, to truly protect myself and uphold the law, I had to ensure his legal reckoning. The question hung in the silence of that cold room, heavy and absolute. If saving Caleb means sacrificing your own integrity and financial safety one more time, by trying to bury the evidence of his crime, would you do it? My eyes met Caleb's across the room, He was a shell of a man, broken by his own failings. I knew what his father would have told me to do. I knew what I had to do to finally break the cycle of enabling. We submit everything. Olivia, I stated, my voice steady, my resolve ironclad. Every piece of evidence. The truth must be exposed, no matter how painful the outcome for him. The fight for my money was over. The fight for my soul and his was just beginning. The preliminary hearing was held 3 weeks later. It was a cold, formal affair, designed not to determine guilt, but to establish probable cause and assess the strength of the prosecution's case against Marissa Ward, Griffin Hale, and, implicitly, Caleb Ward. The courtroom was packed journalists, local residents curious about the high-profile elder abuse case, and a smattering of legal observers. I sat beside Olivia, my demeanour outwardly calm, but my heart felt like a drum beating out a desperate rhythm against my ribs. The prosecutor, a sharp young woman named Ms. Davies, began laying out the evidence. The details of their betrayal were laid bare: the fraudulent bank records, the forged power of attorney documents, and the detailed analysis of the $20,000 IRA withdrawal. Then came the visual proof. The courtroom monitor flickered to life, showing the surveillance video from the desolate East End warehouse. The room fell silent as they watched Marissa take the envelope from Caleb, dismiss him with a cold glance, and then hand the cash-filled envelope directly to Griffin Hale. The audio transcript, chillingly clear, played for everyone Griffin's reference to Caleb as the useful idiot, Marissa's nasty laugh, and their casual discussion about taking my house and fleeing to Belize. Marissa's composure, which she had maintained throughout the proceedings, finally broke. She shot Griffin a look of pure, murderous hatred. Griffin, already facing his own legal jeopardy, was the first to testify for the prosecution. He confirmed Marissa was the driving force, the mastermind who had used him to launder her gambling debts and execute the final theft, when he stated, under oath, "I never loved her. She was just a convenient ticket out." Marissa let out a strangled cry, burying her face in her hands. The look on her face confirmed the devastating truth: she was not only a criminal, but a fool who had been betrayed by her own accomplice. Caleb was brought forward. He stood at the defense table, smaller than I'd ever seen him, stripped of his chef's bravado. He didn't fight the charges. He answered his attorney's questions in a low, broken voice, admitting to every false signature and every deceitful action he took to appease Marissa and secure his illusory future. He took responsibility for his part in the crime, not trying to evade the facts, only explaining the delusion that had driven him. Finally, it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand, the weight of 58 years of life, love, and now profound loss, settling on my shoulders. I looked directly at the judge. I told the truth, the absolute, unvarnished truth. I detailed the financial contributions, the excitement, the gradual realization of the betrayal, and the final, terrifying moment in the remote cabin. I recounted the conversation about my memory loss, the calculated cruelty of their actions. I did not ask for mercy for Caleb. I did not soften the blow of his involvement. I spoke of the pain, the rage, and the profound confusion that comes when the person you raised with every fibre of your being turns against you. My voice cracked only once, but my words rang with a truth that silenced the entire courtroom. I fought this not just for the money. Your Honour, I said, meeting the judge's gaze steadily. I fought this for my dignity, for my home, and for the principle that no person, regardless of their age, should be discarded or exploited. I paused, then delivered the line that summarized the ultimate tragedy of the case, the line I had rehearsed only in the dark corners of my heart. I already lost my son a long time ago. I just didn't realize it until I saw him sign my name to a lie. A collective gasp swept through the gallery. Caleb's head dropped so low, his chin nearly touched his chest. Based on the mountain of evidence, the judge quickly established the legal parameters. Marissa was deemed the primary conspirator in the fraud, elder abuse, and attempted sequestration, facing the most severe charges. Griffin Hale faced charges as an accomplice and for his prior offences. Caleb faced a lesser, but still serious, set of charges relating to his complicity in the fraud and forgery. The judge made it clear his cooperation and the evidence of manipulation would weigh heavily, but he was still staring down the barrel of a potential, lengthy, supervised probation, massive civil restitution to pay back my money, and the possibility of a suspended prison sentence. The judge slammed the gavel down, the sound echoing ominously. I have heard sufficient evidence. I will reserve final judgment on the sentences for the next session. All defendants will be held until that time. The high point of my revenge, the capture and the unmasking, had now brought me to the most devastating moment, waiting to see the final, legal ruin of my only child. The courtroom was hushed, the finality of the proceedings hanging heavy in the air. Judge Thompson, a woman known for her measured severity, cleared her throat and began to deliver the sentence. In the matter of the state versus Marissa Ward, Griffin Hale, and Caleb Ward, the court has reviewed the overwhelming evidence of fraud, conspiracy, and criminal elder abuse. She looked directly at Marissa, whose face was pale and hard, Marissa Ward, as the primary orchestrator of a scheme designed to steal the assets and livelihood of an elderly family member. The court finds your actions to be particularly heinous. You are hereby sentenced to 10 years in state prison, with no possibility of early parole. Marissa gasped, her body going rigid before she crumpled against her defense counsel, the decade-long sentence erasing her future in a single, brutal moment. The judge continued, addressing Griffin Hale. Griffin Hale, for your role as a knowing accomplice in this conspiracy, and factoring in your prior convictions for related financial crimes, you are sentenced to 7 years in state prison. Finally, the judge turned her attention to Caleb. The silence in the room was absolute. Caleb Ward. The court recognizes the significant evidence of manipulation and coercion by your co-defendant, as well as your full cooperation with law enforcement. However, your actions were willful and constitute criminal fraud against your own mother. You have broken the law and the deepest trust placed in you. Therefore, you are sentenced to a long-term supervised probation, totaling 5 years, and are required to pay full civil restitution for the misappropriated funds. You will also be required to attend mandatory psychological counseling and financial literacy programs. Any violation of this probation, and you will serve the maximum suspended prison term. Caleb didn't speak. He simply sank onto his knees behind the defense table, letting out a single, shuddering sob of relief and devastation. He had narrowly escaped prison, but the consequence was no less absolute. He was legally bound to the financial wreckage of his actions and under the constant shadow of the law. I rose slowly, my legs stiff, and walked toward the railing where Caleb remained kneeling. His face was a mask of despair, his eyes swollen with tears, not daring to look up at me. He had lost everything: his marriage, his restaurant, his legal freedom, and now, the last thread of unconditional trust from his mother. I leaned down, my voice cutting through the courtroom's stillness. "You have been given a chance. Caleb," I said, not with warmth, but with the cold, hard love of necessary judgment. "Now, you will have to learn from the very beginning what it means to be a man, and what it means to be a decent human being." He finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine. "Mom, please. I know I don't deserve it, but I promise. I will spend the rest of my life trying to fix this. Just, please, don't write me off. Please give me a chance to earn your forgiveness." I said nothing more, turning and walking away. Forgiveness wasn't mine to grant yet. It was something he had to earn from the world he had betrayed. I returned to my quiet house. The home was physically safe, the bank accounts secure, the threat eliminated. But the silence in the kitchen, the echo in the hallways, was now painful, devoid of the familiar warmth of family. My victory felt less like a celebration and more like a hard-fought survival that had left me deeply scarred. I was an older woman now, one who had faced her own child in court and made the choice for justice over blind maternal instinct. The revenge was complete. The criminals were incarcerated. I had won the battle for my assets. 3 months passed. Then, a thin envelope arrived in the mail, postmarked from the facility running Caleb's mandatory counseling program. I opened it, recognizing his handwriting immediately. It was brief. "Dear Mom, I know I can't call or see you yet, but I wanted you to know I'm listening. I'm starting to understand how much I hurt you. The therapist says I need to accept responsibility without making excuses. I'm trying. If I can ever become the man you can look straight into the eyes again without feeling ashamed, that will be the goal of my entire life. Love, Caleb." I walked to my living room window and watched the gold and rust-colored autumn leaves drift down from the towering maple tree. The journey of vengeance was finally over. Yes. But the long, arduous journey of healing and the agonizing, terrifying task of redefining what a mother and son could be to each other after such devastation had only just begun. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with Helena's story. When I asked about the opening date of my son's restaurant, his wife replied, "It was a week ago. It's a tough one, right?" Let me know where you're listening to this story from in the comments and share your thoughts on Helena's final choice. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, and hit that hype button so more people can hear about this kind of betrayal.